Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 40. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. And this week, I want to remind you that you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and of course, Patreon if you want to find all the latest stuff that we do on a weekly basis. Now, I got to be candid with you guys listening here at home. I know I said last week that I'd review the Way of the Clan 6 and Zectus Volume 6 this week, but honestly, I haven't read anything in those series since like book 3 or 4. So to catch up, I'd have to read books 3, 4, 5, and then 6, I believe. And that's just way too much on a busy week like this is for LitRPG. Now again, they're not bad series necessarily. I just, for some reason, one reason, I stopped reading into those series. Like for World of Valdira, it was because the story got a little wonky for me, and there were recurring translation issues. But for Zectus, there was really just no reason. I was enjoying the story. I think I just got distracted by other shiny LitRPG objects, and so it'll take me a little while to catch up. But that's not going to happen this week, of course. So just letting you know, heads up that I won't be reviewing those this week after all. But I will be talking about and reviewing Ravenscroft Conspiracy, a LitRPG thriller, Tactical Phantasia, Episode 1, also Back in the Game, then The Glitch Fiends. Additionally, I'll be reviewing Soul Linked Origin and Runesmith, a LitRPG short story. And I will also be reviewing I'm a What? I was reincarnated as a Magic Academy. Yep, that's the title. And also by the same author, Dragons Can Be Cute Too, 100 Luck, and the Dragon Tamer Skill. So those are the 8 books that I'll be reviewing this week on the podcast. Now we're going to move into LitRPG news. Now, beginning in LitRPG news, we're going to talk about Apollo Thorne, author of the codename Freedom. He submitted a short story to Sci-Fan Magazine's All LitRPG edition, which is their April edition. It's a wonderful short story that first appeared on the Royal Road, re-entitled How the Goblins Stole Christmas, which is actually suggested by myself. I really did like the short story. It's really cute. It's set in that series world, but it's a standalone short story. If you haven't read it on the Royal Road, go check it out. Or you can read it in April. When you pick up Sci-Fan Magazine, if that's the thing that you read. So there you go. But again, congratulations to Apollo for getting a short story. And of course, there's a bunch of other LitRPG authors, I should say, in that particular issue of that magazine, digital magazine. Okay, now in other news, Ehab Lachir, a friend of the podcast, has posted on his YouTube page an amateur reading of Sword Art Online Progressive. Now, he explains in this post there on YouTube that he's almost blind and that ebooks just don't work for him as an option. A friend of his decided to help him out by recording some light novels that don't officially have audiobooks. He reads a ton of audiobooks, by the way, listens to a ton of audiobooks. He readily acknowledged that he doesn't have the copyrights to those stories. However, if the publishers ever ask him to stop having them on the internet, he'll be more than happy to take them down. But for now, it's basically a fan project that he hopes to help other people in his same situation who have to rely on the spoken word to get their fictional stories. So, but we'll have a link in the show notes if you want to subscribe to his page. I listened to them. They're not bad. Again, his friend is doing him a favor by essentially reading these stories. They're not a professional audiobook narrator by any means, but it's still pretty nice. Of course, if you can't read LitRPG, listening to it is another option. So there you go. Now, in Delvers LLC news, according to Blaze Corbin, he announced this week that Delvers LLC Obligations, the second book in that series, Obligations Incurred, is all finished. It'll have a release date of the first week of April. So good job, Blaze. Happy to hear that it's finished, and I look forward to reading it in April. Now, additionally, Travis Bagwell has released the 4th chapter of his next book, Awaken Online Precipice, to his Patreon supporters this week. Up to chapter 3 is actually free to everybody, but only as Patreon supporters get chapter 4 right now. You don't have too many weeks to wait for the full release of the novel, but if you can't wait, throw them some shekels. Let them, get those early, chapter editions. Additionally, he has a sample of the audiobook version of Awaken Online Precipice, which he's planning to do a simultaneous release of with the ebook version. But we'll have a link in the show notes if you want to listen to the sample he's put up on SoundCloud for, Awaken Online Precipice. Okay, in other audio goodness news, Start the Game Galacticon, written by Vasily Manko. That's the first and only book in that series so far. It's out on audiobook. It's on Audible. So we'll have a link in the show notes if you want to go check that out. Additionally, a new Audible edition of Critical Failures 4 is also out. That's a wonderful LitRPG series. Super funny. Lots of potty humor. And this is book 4 called The Phantom Penis. Pinas. Pinas. Creatures and Caverns, that's that series name. So it's also out on audiobook. Go check out both of those if you need some audiobook goodness in the LitRPG genre. Okay, now these are some books that are out currently in the LitRPG. They've come out the last week or are out today, but I'll end up reviewing them next week. But if you want to check out some new stuff that actually here, Death Portal Online is out. Burning Eden, a LitRPG digital thriller. I have questions about this, but it's out. It says it's LitRPG. Additionally, I'll be reviewing next week Never Knew What Hit Him. This is book 2 in the Owls Reincarnated as a Magical Academy book. And then The Eternal Awakening, a LitRPG saga. That's out now as well. And of course, Shadows of the Great Forest, Realm of Archon, book 4. It's actually going to be out the day that this comes out, but I'll be reviewing it next week because it's not out yet as I'm recording this. But I'm looking forward to reading that one. Okay, now an upcoming LitRPG. I'll just be talking about March and April's upcoming LitRPG, but we have a ton of stuff for April, May, and June. So if you want to look at the full list of upcoming LitRPG, you can check out us on Facebook or our regular website at geekbyspodcast.com. The LitRPG recommendation page will have that list as well, if you just have to see what's coming up in the next more than 2 months. But in March 21st, we have Dragon Mastery Daybreak. On the 28th, you'll have New Horizons, which is the Emerelia book 4. Of course, March 31st, Awaken Online Precipice. Sometime in March, it's supposed to be Earth Tactics Advance. I'll see if it comes out. It's a good story. Additionally, on April the 2nd, the Commandant Chess Set, which is The Way the Shaman book 5, will be out on the 2nd of April. On the 11th of April, Dominion of Blades is a new story. And on the 25th of April will be Emerelia book 5. That's right. He puts out a new LitRPG novel every single month. It's called This Is Our Land. And of course, on the first week of April, which we just read in the LitRPG news, Delvers LLC Obligations Incurred. Now on to new releases and reviews. Okay. In new releases and reviews, we got a bunch of short stories and some longer novels. Some of them are great, some of them are not. I'm letting you know what I think about them. I'll begin with I'm a what? I Was Reincarnated as a Magic Academy Book 1. This is a super funny title for a super funny book written by Dragomir Christian Madeline. I think Dragomir is the name of the author on Real Road, so that's why it's thrown in there. But it's a really funny story. Essentially, here's the synopsis. After an untimely death, a rather average Romanian is reincarnated in a new body in a new world filled with magic and adventure. The only problem is that he isn't exactly humanoid or has any hands. He is a dungeon core installed in a magic academy. His role in this world has already been set by his creator, a bearded old wizard, as a janitor and repairman. Still, will he obediently stick to his job when he holds the memory of his past life, has access to incredible magic, and most importantly, feels the need to build a good old labyrinth? Okay, this is 261 pages, $2.99. It is not on Kindle Unlimited, and that is because it's still on the Royal Road. So if you want to get a sample of it for free, you can head over there and check it out. Again, the title's the same. This to me is a comedic story of a pole soul that's reincarnated as an overpowered dungeon core who's also part of a magic academy somehow. This is not a very super serious story. It's as funny, it's satirical of the genre of dungeon master stories. There's a little bit of a harem thing going on in there, so it doesn't get too graphic or anything. But there's a lot of things going on, and it very much feels like a creative writing project sometimes, and or a collection of serialized stories that have been collected together in a volume. And just go into it being aware of that, not taking it too seriously. You'll have a good time. I know I did. Sometimes the story meanders a little bit, but it's still fun. But it's not, I can't put this book down fun. At least it wasn't for me. I still enjoyed it. I kind of read it between other novels. Like I would read it for chapter 2, go get distracted by it, go read something else, come back to it, and I would still be okay with the story. I didn't, it was that kind of story, but it's still funny and enjoyable to me. I give it a 6 out of 10 though. Okay, also by the same author, Dragons Can Be Cute Too. 100 Luck and the Dragon Tamer Skill. The basic premise of the book is in the title. You can't beat that. This time the author has a more traditional format. It is about 260 pages, about-ish. I say that because there is no official page count for this novel on Amazon, but it's about the same kilobyte size as the other book I just talked about, so I figured about the same page numbers. It is $3.99. It is also not on Kindle Unlimited for the exact same reasons as the previous book wasn't on Kindle Unlimited. Now again, the premise is this. A bunch of people are taken from Earth and by a godlike being and sent to a magical world where there are RPG mechanics. Okay, that's the big picture. Now our story just focuses on a single person who's been gifted to the power of having, well, he gets a particular skill, the Dragon Tamer skill. Now when he's doing his character creation, he makes the rush decision, put all his attribute points into luck. So he maxes it out at 100 luck. So this is kind of a luck build combined with dragon taming storyline. But it's a very cute story, but it also has a lot of action. Again, it combines transported to another world with the luck build and a unique skill of dragon taming. But honestly, the character's most powerful skill is the fact that he treats the dragons he meets as people, and mostly because they look like people. It's very thorough. Again, it's a little of a slow start, but about midway through the story, it gets very actiony all the way to the end, and I definitely enjoyed that switch in pace. A lot of that, the stuff in the first half of the book is very much world building, letting you know how the game mechanics in this world work, some of the history, and it's very cute. It's very interesting, and again, there is a love story aspect to it, which I thought was very adorable. I liked the story, very nice pacing. I give it an 8 out of 10. I enjoyed it a lot more than the Dungeon Academy magical book thing that I talked about. But this one, definitely great. I recommend it. 8 out of 10. Okay, on to Tactical Phantasia, episode 1 by Scotty Fooch. Okay, it is 57 pages. Not that long, but it is also 99 cents, which is not that expensive. It is also available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, this is a very different kind of game mechanic story that I was expecting from, the LitRPG community, which is great. I like that about it. My summarized premise of it is a buxom half-woman, half-snake summons Scott to a world that runs like it's a turn-based strategy game. That's right. Not your general role-playing game mechanics, but it's turn-based. She tells him he's been summoned as her husband and a dark lord so that they can expand their territory and gain power over the land. Only things are never what they appear, of course. Scotty Fooch is always that kind of author who twists these premises and these stories and turns them on their heads and make them really interesting and fun. One of the best things about the story, of course, to me is the turn-based strategy game mechanics, which surprisingly work. You would think that a game mechanic that makes you wait so long sometimes between turns would be challenging, and it is. According to the author, he had a really hard time working them into a narrative, and you can tell that he is not afraid to take on those challenges. So good for you. It's funny, and it took turns that I didn't expect from it. So I was very pleasantly surprised how much I enjoyed it. It was interesting. And again, the big thing for me is that it's new. It's a unique way of using these game mechanics to tell a story. And it was funny, of course, as all of Scotty's, stories generally are. Short but sweet, 8 out of 10 for me. Okay, on to another short story. The Runesmith, a LitRPG short story by the author of that's actually titled The Greenwood Book 2. Now, this is from the same author that wrote A Player in the Greenwood, which was, it was okay. It wasn't bad. I like the story more, though. It's it's short. It's probably about 30, 40 pages. Now, as of recording this, the story seems to have disappeared from Amazon. I had a bunch of links in my story, and I clicked on them, and they don't show up anymore. So I'm thinking maybe the author took it down temporarily for some reason. I don't know why he would take it down permanently, because I enjoyed it so much. But even though it doesn't show up on Amazon, I'm still going to review it because I liked it that much. It's essentially about a evil, chaotic player in that same universe as a player in the Greenwood, who specializes in creating magical runes. So they're actually the author's introducing crafting into this world and this story. Now, this character is cruel. He's a big old meanie, and he's not pretending. He helps rob some druids, and then he slips a ring of empathy on his finger, and some very ironic situations occur. It's funny. It's interesting. And again, it's short enough so that you just got a good dose of LitRPG goodness. Now, there's not a ton of game mechanics explanation, so don't expect a ton of that. But if you've read The Player in the Greenwood, you already know kind of how the world works. So that's why this story still works as LitRPG. And the author introduces, again, crafting into the story, which I was happy to see, which was very much missing from that other story, in my opinion. Again, it's good. It's I want to say lighthearted because it gets very dark occasionally, especially towards the end. But again, it's interesting, and I liked it a lot. It gets an 8 out of 10 for me if you can find it. Okay, on to Ravenscroft Conspiracy, a LitRPG thriller. This is 364 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. It is written by Vic Connor. Now, if you look at the cover of this book, it should be your first clue that there may be issues with it, in my opinion. But I put that to the side when I picked it up. It looks very interesting, but and I try to give it a fair bit of my time. But I honestly, I couldn't make it through the entire book, and that's very unusual for me. Like, most of the time, I just kick back. I read the thing and I let it tell the story it's what it tells. But this time I couldn't finish this story. It was just not my kind of story, to be honest. And I had a lot of issues with it. But I'll read you the premise and I'll let you decide what you think of it. I'm not going to read you the description there because it's really long. Basically, Nicolay is a kid. He's 16-year-old. He's troubled. He's on death row after being wrongly convicted of murdering his parents. Only it turns out that he's actually a super genius. His parents are demigods in a full immersion VR game, and that he's being sponsored to go to a Ravenscroft Academy, an academy in that virtual reality world, and he agrees to go there and get off death row in exchange for trying to break the game. Yeah, that's it. Honestly, it is 364 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and I was bored to death reading it. And I mean, look, this is not about to me, it's not a criticism of the author's writing necessarily. It was very clean. No technical issues there. No spelling errors. It is just not my kind of story. I would, rather than being considering this LitRPG, this is very much a magical academy story. This is something between Harry Potter and the Vampire Academy, if you've read that book. And it's definitely geared more towards the Vampire Academy thing. Again, the first 20% for me was just really boring. And I continued on after that, though. It's honestly, I don't think this is LitRPG in my opinion. I mean, I read it. I'm 30% into the book, and I kept thinking to myself, I'm like, I wish the story would just get into the game world. And it really does take like 120 pages to get into the game world of the story. And even when you're there in that game world, it doesn't feel like it. I mean, to me, this was like a fantasy magical academy story with occasional game references. And if it really just was like, this was somebody's magical academy story that they adapted to LitRPG by adding in some LitRPG terms here and there and tweaking the story so that they sort of made sense in there, but they didn't really mean anything to the story. And And for me, that just I couldn't finish it because of that. I mean, if you're into these kind of stories, if you like that Vampire Academy stuff or whatever it is, maybe you'll like this more than I do. But for me, it was definitely a big pass. I mean, the handful of game mechanics that I saw in the book, in the 65% that I finished it, were not useful. They were just things that were there. Like when someone's eating, there were just oddly some description of saying, oh, it raises your stamina or your energy level. And when someone got hit, of course, in training, there's just like a small bar that said, oh, you've lost some hearts. And they don't describe what that means. And there was a lot of that stuff where it just feels like words were inserted that should be referencing LitRPG stuff in game mechanics, but they don't explain the game mechanics, and those terms really don't seem to have any impact on the actual story. So there's no, while there are game mechanics that are apparently there, and it is set in a VR world, I feel like instead of being a VR world, the author could have just said, oh, a magic spell is cast and you can see all the magical creatures in this world, and it would have been the exact same story. And if it's a true LitRPG, your game mechanic stuff should really be integral into your story. Like if you can take them out and the story is almost exactly the same, probably not a LitRPG. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. Not recommended. But again, part of that is just because the part of the genre is not my kind of thing. So if you're into Magic Academy stories, go read it. I mean, go check it out for yourself. Go give it a sample. This is not just a fit for me in general. And with the addition of that, me feeling like this was just game mechanics sprinkled in without any real character progression according to those game mechanics, can't recommend it. So there you go. Okay, on to Back in the Game. Dream State Saga Book 2. Okay, so this is the second book in that series. It is written by Christopher Knee. It is 217 pages, $2.99. It is also available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, now first off, this story has some of the same pluses and minuses as the first in the series. To me, it actually is better than the first book. If you like the first book in the series, Stuck in the Game, you're probably going to like this one. And for me, the biggest improvement over book 1 is the fact that it jumps right into the game world. There's like a very small, brief explanation of what the main character is doing between the end of book 1 and the beginning of book 2. How he survived his car accident and brain trauma thing. It's very well done, very, very succinct, very, very, very to the point. And then he jumps right into the game world. So to me, that's a big plus. That's where I like to spend most of my time on these LitRPG stories as a personal preference. Now, there are some, of course, generalized character upgrades. The main character and his friends, they all... we'll say, well, actually, no, it's in the description, so I can say it. So Noah and his friends are trying to find the evidence they need to shut down the game company that caused his car accident, which is kind of a spoiler for book 1, but it's been a while. And it's trapped in an orb in the game, the video files that are supposed to be like evidence of malpractice or malfeasance on the game creator's behalf. Okay, so that's kind of the premise of the story, and it's well done, I gotta say. The main game mechanics of the story don't change a ton. The characters themselves are all from book 1, and for a lot of the first part of the story, it feels almost like an extension of book 1. But then after that, it really does kind of take on its life of its own. It becomes an independent book 2 kind of story. You get some new weapons, of course. You get some new lands that are revealed, which have like steampunk and gunpowder themes. And there's actually some, towards the middle-ish, endish, there are some really good plot twists, which I won't spoil. But if you read the reviews in the story on Amazon, you'll see that they're a little controversial. But to me, those plot twists make the story interesting and different from book 1, which is a big plus for me. And kind of improved it, in my opinion. So good job. Give this one a 7 out of 10. Okay, on to The Glitch Fiends. This is book 2 in the Hell's Glitch series, written by Ballart Wright. Okay, it is 313 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, if you read book 1, good for you. It is a story of Sam, who is he's a game developer. He's not a programmer. He's a designer, and he goes into this full immersion virtuality game, which sounds an awful lot like Dark Souls, which is a plus for me. But he goes in there to try to, work things out, test out the game, and he becomes trapped along with a bunch of other beta testers, essentially. But he's trapped in this really difficult, dark fantasy world in which he, under certain circumstances, they can die in the game and die in real life. And then, of course, there's a big subplot of the evil game company trapping them for their own nefarious purposes. Okay, so now in book 2, Sam, the main character, continues his journey through this dark fantasy full immersion game called Project DH. Only now there's a new game patch that makes things more realistic and difficult, as if that game wasn't difficult enough. If you ever played Dark Souls, you know what I mean. But additionally, there's also a glitch, which is where the glitch means things something. Now, this glitch spawns fiends, or new, almost impossible to defeat monsters. And so there's that new aspect to the story as well. So there's a mysterious background issue of, like, is the game becoming sentient? What's the true purpose of all these people potentially dying in this full immersion virtual reality game? What's the big game company's ultimate goal? So there's all that kind of stuff in addition to the combat oriented story. Now again, if you like the video game Dark Souls, you're going to feel right at home with the game mechanics in the story, which is a big plus for me. Again, with the new patch, there's a big update where it brings a little more realism to the story. So there are things like weight matter instead of trying to do particular special moves for a particular type of enemy. The main characters and the other characters have to actually have actual skills with the weapons they choose to use. And I liked that it made this book just a little bit different from book 1, but also kept the good things that I enjoyed so much. So there you go. It was enjoyable. Wasn't super out of the park amazing, but it was definitely as good as book 1, which is also good. And again, you don't actually have to read book 1 to jump into book 2, which is also a plus. The author does a really good job of summarizing what happens in book 1 in the very beginning of it. I give the Glitch Fiends a 7 out of 10. So there we go. Okay, on to Soul Linked Origin, a LitRPG epic written by Mitchell T. Jacobs. This is 443 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, this is from the author of a World at War series, which is a more of a sci-fi lit RPG story. In this story, 100,000 people from Earth are transported to an RPG world created by a maniacal god who thinks he's a great DM. They're dropped into a lush valley with limited resources. And when the amount of food available to them starts to dwindle, they must move out of this valley into the more dangerous world or risk starvation. Now, that seems like a very big story, but it really kind of comes down to 12 individuals who are, and this is a little pet peeve of mine, out of the 100,000 people, only 12 of them are actually fighting monsters. And it's these 12 people who go out of that valley to kind of scout out a new place, potentially for all these people to live. Okay, so that is the premise. Okay, there are a lot of cool things I enjoyed about the story. Some things that I found a little logically challenging, but that didn't ruin it at all in any way, shape, or form. It's more my brain saying, oh, this would be a really great story idea, and I hope the author does this, and he doesn't. But maybe it's something we'll see in book 2. I'll talk about that later. But the things that I really enjoyed about the story, there is a kind of a survival aspect to the story. It's not one of those RPG worlds where characters don't have to eat or drink or worry about survival skills, building shelters, things like that. That's very much a core of the story. That's the impetus for all these people having to leave this nice, comfortable valley where they can kind of practice their beginner skills, is that they're running out of resources: food, shelter, water. They're hunting the deer in the area into extinction. They're trying to grow foods, but again, it's going to take too long, and they're going to run out of food potentially before that crop comes in. That's really cool. That makes the world a little more realistic. It gives these characters a believable motivation to have to leave the comfort of the place that they're in and explore the more dangerous world and maybe improve their skills a bit. So that's cool. Now, the big mechanic of the story, which is one of the only things, game mechanics that's really described in detail, is the soul link, which gives two characters bonus stats when they link each other's souls together. But it also has the risk of killing both of them, because when one of the players takes damage, so does that other character that they're soul linked to. So if one of those people dies while they have that soul link, both of them die. So it's always a risk-reward gamble of whether or not anybody wants to use this, and nobody actually wants to use it within this community, except for two of our, main characters. Okay, and of course, as these 12 characters go out into the wider world, they fight monsters, they go find dungeons to delve into. There's a larger conspiracy story, of course, and I'll get into that in a minute. But this story does kind of have a very slow start. I almost didn't finish. I almost didn't actually read it because I got about 35% into it. I'm like, this isn't that interesting yet. But as soon as they hit that 35% mark and the 12 primary fighters go out and scout the mountain area next to the valley they're in, things got really actiony. And I really had a good time reading it for that. But be aware that it is kind of a slow beginning. Let's see. There is a crafting system of the game. Again, it's not very well described. The maniacal god that kidnaps all the people from Earth really does just drop them into this valley and says, go do stuff. And he's kind of a jerk, but he doesn't give them any tools. They don't have like a store or anything. They have to do everything from scratch, which means that they have to craft on their own. And they can only, in that valley, have the resources to do stone work. So they have to do stone spears, stone swords, stone knives, which is very limiting for a community. And so again, those limited resources again play that core part of the story in being the motivating factor for even just this small group to try to find a new place to live. Again, very nice, lots of action, things that I would have liked to have seen in the story a little bit more. Skills, descriptions of game mechanics, they are there, and so this is LitRPG. Don't worry about that. But I would have liked to get more information. The author describes that there were 50 skills available in crafting alone for these characters, but they only don't describe any of them. They'll name a few like, pottery, blacksmithing, woodworking, but they don't say what they do, and they don't talk about the other ones, which to me is very sad, because in a good LitRPG world, I can build my own character and decide on what crafting things I want to do. And so when I have limited information, it's harder for me to feel immersed in that world the same way as those characters do, because they have information that I don't as the reader. And that always seems unfair to my gamer brain. And let's see. There are also hints in this world and the story that the maniacal god that brought them there is not as all powerful as he says he is. There might be some other powers in the world. So like I said, it's a really good story. I had a good time reading it. I do think that the book went on a little bit long. Like, there's a really good, big, fantastic, climactic battle. About 75% of the story, and it's really good. I enjoyed it a lot. But then after it, climaxes, it continues on for like another 25% for another good 120-ish pages. And that part of the story, even though there was still action and fighting, it wasn't as good as the big climax of the story. And so while there's nothing wrong with that last 25%, really, after a good climax, I really just wanted to either cuddle or take a nap. So I felt that it kind of went on a little bit too long. And I really felt that those last 100-odd pages could have actually been the beginning of book 2. And it would have worked really well. Like, you could have had your big climax scene, big battle, and then, done some cleanup story, ended it, and that would have been very fine as book 2. But again, those are small, very small complaints. This is a really nice story. And I hope to learn more about the larger social consequences of having 100,000 people in one place at one time and seeing the stratification that's going to occur naturally with any kind of human society, where they're going to be like classes that develop or castes, social structures, political dynamics, all those good things which are potential within this kind of larger scale story. I would see some of that in book 2 because it doesn't exist in book 1, but there are a lot of other good fighting scenes in book 1, so I'm okay. I'm content. This gets a 7 out of 10 for Soul Linked Origin, so I enjoyed it. So there you go. That's it, folks. We're done. DONE. Okay, and if you like the podcast and you want to support us, you can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. And again, everyone, thank you very much for hanging out with me again. It's a longer episode, 35 minutes at this point. 8 books though to review, so seems reasonable to me. But again, until we can hang out again, until we can talk about this thing that I love, LitRPG, remember, folks, to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye.